Hey friends, this podcast has always been dedicated to the proclamation of truth, that the truth is found in Christ and the truth is found in a biblical Christian worldview that helps us make sense out of life. That means any ideas that are not logically coherent or internally consistent fall apart. And we're going to be talking on our podcast today about some of those things that are happening in real life. The drama of the WNBA continues, and we're taking it to a whole nother level, and we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about why Marxism is fundamentally flawed, and wherever it is practiced, it ends up in horrific tyranny, poverty, and a host of other horrific conditions. So we're going to talk about that today. This is all good news for those of us who are lovers of Jesus Christ, because he is the way, the truth, and the life.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Good to have you all with us once again. We're going to have a lot of fun today. It's always fun when, and that's why I love doing this podcast. It's always fun when you speak truth and when your worldview is like really rooted in reality, because there's so much craziness out in the world. And if you just stand for truth long enough, it ends up exposing itself. You know, we talked about this. A good worldview is logically coherent. Yeah. It's internally consistent in terms of the rationale. And unless you're a total wacko leftist who believes that logic is racist, and there are those people out there, you realize that, our minds are made to correspond with truth, and every argument eventually rises or falls on the basis of whether it is based in truth. And anyway, we're gonna talk about a couple important things in our podcast today. But man, we had a great weekend. We shared, I think last time we were on the podcast, we just had Pastor Keith Tusey in town. We just got done having Apostle John Tetzola in town. What a wonderful man of God. And he always leaves a rich deposit here in terms of just teaching, impartation, prophetic anointing that's on his life. So that was really, really great. And let me just mention that we are starting a brand new series this coming Sunday called Life Together. We're going to be rolling out some really, really exciting changes, additions, not wholesale changes, but really, I guess, more opportunities for people to get connected in small groups. And Pastor Andrew, this is not in any of our notes here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to roll that out yet.
I'm going to throw, why is it so important that we are connected and that people are in a group, and where are we going with all that?
You know, the Bible teaches on it. But even if you don't believe in the Bible, every sociological studies, relational study, thousands of years of history have shown that human beings are made to be in relationship.
Yeah.
And be in relationship.
God said it right from the beginning.
God said it, yep.
It is not good for man to be alone. And obviously he's talking about Adam, but it's bigger than that. God himself exists in relationship, and he expects us to exist, and if we're going to be healthy anyway, in relationship.
We're the healthiest. We reach our full potential. We're the happiest. Yeah. We're physically the healthiest, not just emotionally, physically most healthiest when we are in community. And that doesn't mean you just go to work, clock in, clock out. It means that you are actually in connection, relational connection, knowing others and being known. Yeah. And at Living Stones, we want to create environments. We want to facilitate great environments in which everyone who attends Living Stone can be known and know others and be known.
Yeah, amen. Well, we're going to interrupt this podcast with late-breaking news from the WNBA, the political ideological circus that has become the Women's National Basketball Association. And we're going to cut right now to this important clip on the 2027 WNBA draft. You're not going to want to miss this.
After careful consideration and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, I am officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. My team and I have carefully examined the WNBA's eligibility criteria and governing framework surrounding self-identification and inclusion. Based on the current guidelines, I can and am officially declaring my eligibility for the upcoming WNBA draft in May 2027. I am definitely not here to mock, make fun of, or disrespect any community or personal choices. I am simply asking that the current rules be applied equally to everyone. The rules that represent the very values many WNBA players and coaches have publicly advocated for. My team and I are prepared to ensure these guidelines are applied equally, consistently, and without exception. And I look forward to the WNBA honoring its stated principles. See you at training camp.
So what do you think about that? I don't know about you, but I hope I have the #1 draft pick because I know who I'm going to be picking.
The odds that someone's going to average 50-plus points a game next season in the WNBA just went way up. So.
And when you look at his argument, let's examine this because this is the perfect storm. All it takes is somebody to speak the truth. We saw this happen, in our podcast last week when we talked about Sophie Cunningham making this simple statement that she doesn't believe it's a good thing for little girls to have men in their private spaces, their bathrooms, their showers, their locker rooms, all that kind of stuff. And it was a benign common sense statement, which the NBA politicized and turned it into an attack on trans kids or whatever, which is ridiculous. And the question all along has been, are you serious? This is the women's NBA. Why would you allow a confused male to dress up like a female and to compete in your league, which is for women? And ultimately it gets back to the question that the league keeps avoiding, which is, what is a woman? You cannot have a women's basketball league if you don't know what a woman is. And so these guys, not just our friend there, Mr. Cantor, Enos Cantor, but also another NBA player, Royce White, are basically declaring themselves as candidates for the 2027 draft because they are identifying as professional women's basketball players and basically saying, according to the guidelines that are currently in place from the WNBA, we qualify. And what I love about this is it perfectly forces the WNBA's hand, because they can't keep putting their head in the sand and acting like, oh yeah, we think whoever feels like they're a woman can be a woman and can play in our league. Well, there's two men that are, pushing that logic, and now they're going to be forced to deal with it. Your perceptions, I guess, on this?
Yeah, it's. You brought it up to me this week, and after you brought it to me, I went to go do a little research, and I read up on Entis Cantor Freedom and just kind of his resume. He's been known for speaking up for human rights abuses from Turkey to China. He claims, and I believe him, that he's been blackballed because some of the controversial things that he's spoken up.
And just a little bit background. This guy's a 6'10" professional athlete. He played for the Knicks, the Celtics, the Trailblazers. I mean, he's a legitimate pro
NBA player.
Yeah.
I remember watching him play.
Yeah.
He's not one of the best NBA players, but he is a NBA player, which is already amazing.
Well, yeah, okay. And he's 6'10". So if he can barely walk and he can get close to the basket, he will be the WNBA scoring leader. Yeah. I mean, that's just the fact.
And he's way more than that. He's good. He's got skills. But it's interesting because, last week when we talked about all the pushback from the coaches and other players in the WNBA against Cunningham's statement, it was all very emotional. Oh, I want everyone to feel welcome.
Inclusive.
I want everyone to feel inclusive. It's all these emotional terms. I know why people say emotional terms, because emotional terms, you're never the bad guy. It's about the kids. It's about the trans kids, all that stuff. It sounds good. But at some point when you make policy, you need facts. You need data. You need clarity.
Yep.
Nobody likes clarity, because without clarity, you can always be the good guy. But when clarity is set, someone's got to be the good and someone's got to be the bad guys. And what these two guys have done is they're saying, okay, enough of these emotions. This emotion sounds good in front of TV. We need clarity. What is the clarity in this case? Are you going to let guys like us play, or are you going to let guys of us says you can't play because you're not a woman? What's going to be?
And so this is a tough challenge, because I already saw some lady dismissing it all, saying, well, yes, we believe in that trans, women should be in the league, but not men like this who are just trying to make a political statement. Oh, well, now she's judging that person's self-identification. We would never do that with a confused male who's walking around in a dress. We would say, oh, we appreciate their authenticity and their genuineness and all of this kind of stuff. They're coming out as their true self, who they believe they really are. Well, who are you to say that Enos Cantor doesn't think he's a woman or doesn't have a vision as a woman to play in the WNBA?
The clarity, that lady will be saying, if it's a political statement, then you're not allowed to play. Well, my question is, so is that the clarity? Is that the line you want to draw? This is a political statement and this is not a political statement.
Yeah.
But like you said, who to make that judgment? So in the end of the day, it becomes a commissioner who's going to say, well, this is political, this is not. It's based on her opinion on who's political, who's not. She's a mind reader now. She judged your intention now. That's the clarity.
Yeah. So one person's worldview, or one person that becomes the tyrant and becomes the dictator and gets to make policy for the entire league.
Mr. Freedom here says very clearly, on these public statements, says, I'm not here to mock anybody. I just want to make sure the standards apply to everyone fairly. That's his.
Well, and to your point, the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement says, quote, only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. What does that W stand for? Women. That's kind of obvious, but only women can play in the women's NBA.
Yeah.
But it never defines the word woman. There are no clear biological, hormonal, or other objective standards. This gap has now put Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and the league under pressure to either defend self-declaration, which is what Enos is doing. He's self-declaring as a woman, or finally write a real definition, which is exactly what you're saying. There's got to be something in writing that's definitive, that can be applied equally across the board. And it's just ironic that because of the CRT, the DEI stuff, and all this stuff that's all mixed into this, what is the modern WNBA, that they cannot, as a bunch of women, define what a woman is. I mean, that we talked about that irony last week. And I love the takeaway here. Women's sports exist because of real biological differences. If a league cannot or will not define woman, it cannot honestly protect the category it claims to serve. I mean, this is just basic logic. Now, Enos is not the only player that is doing that. We also have another NBA player named Royce White. I love what he says. He was being interviewed on Fox News, and the Fox interviewer literally had no response. He didn't know what to say. This is how it went. Royce White said this: my goal is to help elevate the WNBA. I think the ticket prices and the attendance will soar. I think the audience, the live audience, will increase. And I think ultimately it's good for the game. I'm going to help evolve the game. Who would argue that a player like myself or Enos Kanter, or in the future, maybe even LeBron James after he expires in the NBA, maybe he wakes up one day and realizes he's a woman as well? Who could argue that that wouldn't make the women's game better? To which the Fox News announcer said, so listen, he goes, I don't even know what to say to that. And Royce White was the 16th overall pick in the 2012 NBA draft. So, I mean, he's an incredible basketball player. Earlier in the same interview, White said he's, quote, just having a blast in my feminine era. And that after further review, it would appear that I am indeed sometimes identifying as a transgender woman. And so he also is in the draft. And I love what Clay Travis, who also works with Fox, he said this. His argument is simple, talking about these two men. If he's not a woman, then they're going to have to acknowledge that in some way they can determine what a woman is. The moment the league tries to say can or doesn't qualify, it has to explain by what standard. The one thing gender ideology orthodoxy insists is that it can never be defined. That's why you never hear any proponents of this actually defining what a woman is. Travis pointed out that the left has spent years mocking the very question, what is a woman, as a punchline, and then built policy on the premise that it has no fixed answer. In other words, a man who identifies as a woman is to many people on the far left just as much a woman as a woman who was born as a woman. Apply the rule honestly to a 6'11" former NBA center, and the whole framework collapses under its own logic. He says, declaring you're a woman never made you one in the first place. So I just crack up watching this drama unfold, because at some point, when you get people who are willing to poke at the irrationality of it, the whole balloon pops and it all, goes spinning off into the distance.
He's the little kid who says, "Hey, the emperor has no clothes on."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it takes courage, and Sophie Cunningham's getting the brunt of this. For common sense, and I'm glad that other people are coming around her, including, as we talked about, including some first wave feminists like Martina Navratilova, who I believe is a lesbian, world class tennis player, but even she understands that you can't have males competing against females because they're physically stronger, they're bigger, they're larger, and all those things, and it just denies the God-given natural distinctions, the creational realities that God has established, and for people to basically say, no, those things don't exist, it's just foolishness. And even Clay Travis, I don't know if you saw this, but he has $10 million on the board. The team that won the WNBA last year was a team from Las Vegas. I think they're called the Aces. And he said, I got $10 million out. I will pick a high school basketball team, and we will play the Aces. I got $10 million that we will win. And again, anybody who's outside of the ideological bubble realizes that's not a slam on women. It just means they're different. God made them differently, and they're not going to be able to compete with a typical high school guys basketball program. No matter how great we try to make them, it's just not going to happen.
Not the same. Yeah.
So anyway, this is common sense, but at the root of this is a fundamental rebellion against God and the created order. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because they're saying that they're not going to make this a political issue. Well, it's going to be interesting how they resolve this problem.
Well, what move do they have? I was thinking all around. I'm like, because they're back
this
there.
This is like checkmate, man.
What move are they going to make? I mean, do you actually think they will allow these two guys to play in WNBA? Do you think is there any chance that they will say, well, those guys can enter the draft? Or maybe these won't draft them. I don't know.
I think they will simply try to say this is a political move by, I was watching Reggie, who was the famous player. He's got Reggie Miller, and his sister was being interviewed. Cheryl Miller, yeah. And she said, we're not going to allow people to come in from the outside and try to steal our brand or mess with our brand. Her brand being, again, all this woke ideology, what the craziness that the WNBA has come to stand for. We're not going to let outsiders. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? These guys have just pushed your brand to the edge, and so she's making it kind of a political game that the left or the conservatives and the right are trying to play. So I think the only way they can do it is say, well, these guys are not really transgenders. The left has never let reason or logic get in the way of what they believe. So I think they'll just dismiss it like, oh, we all know you're not really a transgender. And then they'll try to go on with business as usual. And then, we'll try to point out the obvious inconsistencies to their position, but they don't care about that. It's all ideology.
I wonder if it go to the courts. And then they'll find some judge who just ruled the same thing you just said without actual. Because if you really examine the document,
yeah,
a fair judge will say, hey, no, you got to let these guys in. But my thing is, like, no team will just draft them because they're all in collusion. No team is, this is not the NBA when, like, true competition really matters.
I would love when, they all get together. All right, guys, or gals, or whatever they are. We're going to all work together here. And then all of a sudden at the last minute, one team that really wants to win goes, and we draft, Mrs. Cantor. And he comes out with those big fluffy eyelashes and lipstick on and wearing his pink outfit or whatever, and goes right out and just slam dunks the ball. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, you just described the plot to the movie in the 2000s called Juwanna Mann. Some of you know what I'm talking about.
I would love it. Well, if we could get rid of the coach of the Indiana Fever, who will not defend her players who keep getting abused every week, if we could get rid of her, maybe that coach would draft Enos, and we'd have a really dynamic team. Can you imagine if Caitlin Clark had a 6'10" or 6'11" center getting rebounds for her to keep dishing out those threes?
I think Royce White is correct. If that happened, if Entis Cantor Freedom is actually playing the WNBA, I will watch that game.
I'll bet you would.
Wouldn't you? I would reserve the time slot. It's like the first game. That's must-watch TV. What'd you say?
Well, here's what else is true.
Oh, Matt, you'll watch that.
All right. Let's even start a WNBA fantasy league.
Telling you. Well, that's going a little too far. I don't even know any. I can't name 2 players. But that would be very, very interesting.
So here's the reality.
Yeah.
One male player
Yeah.
who thinks he's a woman,
Yeah.
one male player who's pretending he's a woman, whatever, would completely destroy the whole league.
Well,
the whole league
a
would
real legitimate NBA player. A good player. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, these guys are past their prime and all that kind of stuff, but they can still go out there and be the best player in the league.
Sure. No, those guys, yeah.
So anyway, it's just fun to watch lies get exposed, and I got nothing against the WNBA. I hope they can come to their senses and come out of this, because I think it's a good thing, and I think it's a good thing when you have, again, the Sophie Cunninghams of the world being role models for some of these young girls and standing up for virtue and truth and what's right and protecting what a woman is. I think the league has a place, but man, they're doing their best to destroy themselves and destroy some of their best players. So I hope they come out of it. Let's talk about another worldview issue that played out. I think we were all, shocked and not shocked to see this radical Muslim from Michigan edge out the nomination for the Senate race. And some of his views, he hates Israel, he hates white people, he hates America, hates all kinds, I was looking at their agenda. In fact, what was crazy, Marion and I were up in Holland, Michigan, and Michigan's such a beautiful state. We went up one afternoon on our day off and took our bikes, and we were riding around. There's a lot of bike trails up there. It is a beautiful, beautiful city, beautiful homes, well-kept, manicured yards. Just a quaint, beautiful place. And I was just struck with the thought of how blessed we are to live in America and what a great place this is. And then I'm driving by and I'm seeing, he got most of his support from university towns where, again, we have students who have been poisoned by this, ideology that they're getting fed in a lot of our public schools, and not even public schools, even some woke Christian schools. And I'm watching some of these yard signs for this guy, and I'm thinking, what has happened to the brains of American youth, and not just youth? We see a lot of, liberals my age, again, especially women who are, falling for this nonsense. But when you look at what they're asking for here, these democratic socialists, I highlighted some of this. Defund the police by rejecting any expansion to police budgets or scope of enforcement while cutting budgets annually towards zero. So they're basically neutering the police departments. How about this? End the criminalization of working class survival. That's fancy Marxist speech for basically if people are guilty of committing, thievery from like grocery stores or whatever, then don't punish those people.
That's a very interesting way of phrasing it.
Yeah, criminalization of working class survival. That's weird.
That's
freedom for all
yeah.
incarcerated people. So anybody that's in prison right now, we're going to open the jails and just let these people out. How about this? Demilitarize the police and end colonial policing of our cities and neighborhoods. Colonial policing. Freedom of working class self-organization and democratic political action. And then finally here, invest in community self-governments and care, not cops. So, this is a hard to believe. Like, how in the world would you just let everybody out of jail and do away with police? Like, where does this craziness come from? But it kind of goes it goes right back to our worldview. And I want to highlight that a little bit. We talked in our podcast before what people believe about God and what people believe about human beings or anthropology determines largely your view of reality. So what would cause a group of people to come up with this crazy idea that we need to get rid of prisons and we need to get rid of police. Now, they'll say, well, we want to get rid of prisons down the road, but in the short run, or rather this way, they say it this way, we want to keep police, we just want to shrink their influence, but we want to get rid of prisons, which begs the question, what will police be for if there's no prisons? Are they just going to run around, giving people pats on the back, or
saving kids from trees?
Yeah. It's just crazy. So why would you believe that? Or we talk about the open borders. Like, why would you think that we can all just open our borders, get rid of any borders, and just let people kind of come and go? And really, the crux of this issue is a competing vision for social order. One that's rooted in what we believe the kingdom of God. The other is rooted in the kingdom of man. When you reject God's authority, then government becomes God, and government becomes the source of social order. And that's what we're seeing right now. So on the one hand, you've got global utopian kind of views compared with a biblical nationhood view. And I think we talked about that in a previous podcast. Nations are good things, they're biblical things. This whole globalist view is really rooted in a utopian myth that fails to understand a basic biblical tenet, which is fallen human nature. So let's talk about that. Marxists view the whole world through materialism. And so if the material is what drives everything, capital, get rid of the capitalists, all that kind of stuff, then they have this and we've seen this before in the news when those on the left were saying that the reason that Hamas was cutting people's heads off, or ISIS, was because they needed more job opportunities. You just sit there and you look at these people like, are you people moronic? What is it? But connect the dots. So let's talk about that. What's the dots between a Marxist materialist view of humanity's problems with a biblical view of humanity's problems?
One's externalized, is all systems and processes, and one's internal, which is that human beings have sin inside of us, that we need systems and processes to hold us in check and accountability, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that if we can just redistribute wealth, then people will have money, and if they have money, then they can have all their needs met, and if they have all their needs met, they'll be happy, and then we could all live happily ever after if we just get rid of all the
dials
billionaires.
And correctly, governmentally, and all of a sudden you create utopia.
Yeah.
Because the issue is not us. Man's born free. Right, that's the Rousseau, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is interesting because the definition of utopia is nowhere. That's what the word means. And, it's kind of a parody. People that have written about utopia before, we're not writing about it in glowing terms. It was a joke. The word utopia means nowhere, which means even though people have tried this for years and years and years, it just doesn't work because government is made. This is interesting. Government is made up of fallen human individuals. So when you try to blame systems are simply, structures that have been created by fallen human beings and who are led by fallen human beings. And so you can never get away from the fact that it's people who mess up all these good systems or bad systems to create the bad systems.
I think there's one other major difference between kingdom worldview and material or communistic worldview is that in the communistic worldview is material is scarce. It's give and take. It's a win-lose situations. Whereas in the kingdom, which I would say in the capitalistic perspective, not all people believe this, but in general, capitalistic society, you believe that because of innovation, because God gave us the ability to create, there is win-win situation. That if you become prosperous, doesn't mean I go poor. So it's not this neighbor against neighbor. Right. It's that if you become prosperous, you can come bless me and I can become prosperous too.
Right.
That's what leads to true wealth. It's not this mentality, well, they're poor. The reason that they want to kill a bunch of people is because they're poor. No, it's because their mentality. It's because their mindset. It's their culture. Because they want win-win, then we can all win.
That sword cuts two ways because, as you pointed out, character, if you I watched Charlie Kirk debating that Piker guy, who's advocating Marxism, and Charlie said, hey, look, I work hard, I take risk, I invest in my money, I build an organization, and you're sitting over here wanting to spend every capitalist capitalist money. But how much money are you giving? Are you giving 95% of your money to help, alleviate poverty, blah, blah, blah? It removes the moral and character factors that lead to poverty or that lead to wealth creation. And we're not equal on that. We're equally created in the image and likeness of God, but what we do with our lives, with our money, with our time, with all of those things varies from human being to human being. So you're never going to get equal outcome. And we've seen before, sometimes some of the most miserable people are people that have the most wealth. So wealth doesn't make you happy. Wealth doesn't alleviate your problems. And the human heart is always lusting for more. That's why people are not satisfied apart from Christ, because there's always this longing for more, a bigger house, more money, a better wife, better kids, whatever the situation, better, but they're never ever satisfied. And simply redistributing material things does not satisfy that longing. And so we're never going to find that utopian place. And then what happens is, when we keep looking, when we reject God and we reject God's authority, and we start looking for governments to bring about these utopian conditions, it's only a matter of time before you realize this is not working. And when it's not working, what those in power do is they become more tyrannical. They have to come up with a reason why it's not working. I just saw a montage of all these clips from back in the COVID hysteria days. And it reminded me of the taste of tyranny and globalism and utopianism that we were getting on a daily basis. I'm watching these talking heads on mainstream media basically saying it's the unvaccinated that are causing the problems. I mean, they split America right down the middle, and they basically said, if you are not vaccinated, you are the problem. You're spreading this. If you just would get vaccinated. And I just, I felt that spirit again. And we haven't really experienced that in my lifetime in America. I've never experienced that.
Happens all times in other countries.
Oh, yeah. But this is that utopian, we know better. It's government by the elites. And Fauci was a picture of that. Trust the science, all of that kind of elitism that basically says, the elite class knows how to fix all the problems. Just give us your liberties, give us your vote, bow to us, and we'll make everything better. And that has been an absolute disaster throughout human history when people reject the kingdom of God and God as king, reject the authority that God's given. And I go right back, here's an example in the Bible, 1 Peter chapter 2. For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the head of the state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. It is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. So, it's talking about all authority is delegated authority from God, and that government and the police, by extension, have a legitimate realm of authority to punish evildoers. But once again, if we don't have a document that defines what evil is, kind of like back to the NBA, what is a woman? If we don't have a document that tells us what's evil and what's good, then police can get into a really bad situation. So it all goes back to Scripture. It all goes back to submitting to God and to God's delegated authority. It goes back to biblical definitions of good and evil, and it goes back to a biblical worldview that recognizes humans are fallen creatures, and human beings are never going to solve our planet's deepest problems. And this is what we're seeing. This is the fundamental problem with Marxism, is this globalistic optimism that they have that has never, ever worked in real life. To your point, when we're talking about some of the tenets of this democratic socialism, they believe poverty causes crime, economic inequality causes conflict, lack of resources causes social dysfunction, unfair systems produce bad behavior. And so how do you fix that? It's through redistribution, economic restructuring, expanded governmental management, social engineering, and the like. But if the problem is not economic and the problem is really not environmental, and the problem is rooted, as you said, in the human heart, in pride and envy and selfishness and greed and rebellion against God, What's that?
Laziness.
Laziness. All of these things that are character
Giving people
issues.
more money doesn't make them less lazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was just looking here, there's a history of utopian movements. Of course, the earliest one was the Tower of Babel. But we've got the French Revolution that was rooted in liberty, equality, and fraternity and ended up in an absolute bloodbath. Some of these I've seen personally. We had the Marxist communism in the Soviet Union, which led to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. We had Mao's China, which led to the starvation of millions of people. And this is the one I got to actually experience to some degree when our missions team went to Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot was looking to create an agrarian communist paradise. And we actually went to it was a high school that he converted into a prison, and it became the most notorious, place because of the bloodshed, the murder, the torture that took place there. We saw the bins filled with human skulls from the people that were murdered. We saw pictures of children that were babies tossed into the air and bayoneted. Just horrific things that were done in the name of revolution and these Marxist ideologies. So we really need to pay attention to what's going on in the election. I hope this is an opportunity where the enemy once again has overplayed their hand. But we've got people like Bernie Sanders. What a waste of a senator, and Bernie Sanders, who's kind of the ringleader of all these young radicals. Never had a job in his life, and he's going to help us fix all the problems. I hope they've overplayed their hand. What I'm hearing is we may get a Senate seat out of Michigan because the average working class person and average family is trying to raise a family is not jumping on board with these folks that hate America, hate white people, and hate Israel. I'm not sure that. Hopefully, we're not ready for that. But and I'm saying too. I don't know. That'd be another clip I'd love to show, starting off one of our other podcasts. But a gentleman that fled Iran and that basically was at the city council meeting in Texas. I don't know if you saw that, but he stood up and gave a blistering warning about what's coming with Islam and Sharia law in the state of Texas. I forget how many mosques they have in Texas, and these city councils, because of suicidal empathy, are unable to say, no, we're not going to have a mosque in our city. We're not going to allow that to happen. And they're going along. This was a 7-0 vote in favor of allowing the mosque to be built in their city. And there's these people coming from these countries saying, are you people nuts? Let me tell you, as someone who lived there, what they're going to do. So I hope we can shake out of this, stupor that we've been in. This has largely been this DEI CRT stupor, woke stupor, and all of a sudden realize, what are we doing? And it's okay to say no. Islam is evil, and Islam is a wicked ideology, and everywhere Islam goes, people suffer. It's okay to say that. It's the truth, but it does take courage to say that. So it is a time to stand up and speak up for what we believe and speak out on some of these issues. Little save the date notice here. In February of next year, Lord willing, we're going to be hosting a conference on this whole red-green alliance between Marxism and Islam, and the threat of what's really at stake here. So I think part of the job of the church and part of the job as shepherds of the church is to be watchmen on the wall. And certainly our greatest threat in America is not secularism or atheism, it's Islam, because Islam has a vision of taking over the planet, and and they're committed ideologically to it, as we're seeing in Iran right now. And those are the folks that we need to be paying a lot of attention to. So, and obviously praying for a great move of God's salvation, spiritual awakening, and all those things. But from a political, governmental standpoint, we need to be resisting all of this firmly. So, any final exclamation point from you?
I feel like there's always an attack on liberty. There always will be.
Yeah.
A couple years ago is wokeism.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's gone.
Right.
But it's definitely lost some steam. And then there's a reaction to that. There's a reaction to that. It's just like it never ends.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. You know, you're right. And I think that reality right there should kind of awaken us from we won this last election, everything's going to be good. It's like, no, we're in a spiritual battle till Jesus comes. And we know the battle is going to intensify. It's not going to get lessen. It's going to intensify. So that just causes us to be a little awake, right? And realize, okay, I'm going to be in a fight. It also reminds me of Dr. Tetzola's message, second service, about building a strong spirit on the inner man so that you don't quit when things get challenging or things get discouraging or whatever, that you build yourself up on the inside so that you're able to withstand the battles that we're going to face all of our lives until we go home to be with the Lord or He comes to get us. And that would be something I would encourage you. Go to our website, livingstones.church, and a great brand new website. Great resources there on the media section, and I encourage you to take advantage of that. Also, like and share this podcast with as many people as you can, as we're trying to speak about important issues each week from a biblical perspective. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.